The history of the American experiment is often written by those who occupy the highest offices of government, yet occasionally a figure emerges who commands the conscience of a nation without ever holding its highest title. On February 17, 2026, the United States bid farewell to such a titan. Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr., born into the suffocating grip of Jim Crow and rising to become the shadow president for the marginalized, passed away at the age of 84. His journey was more than a biography. It was a century-long crusade that bridged the gap between the shackles of the past and the possibilities of the future. The crucible of the segregated South. The story of Jesse Jackson began in the shadows of Greenville, South Carolina in 1941. Born to a young mother in a society designed to stifle black potential, Jackson's early years were defined by the sharp sting of segregation. In the South of his youth, the colored and white signs were not just physical markers, they were psychological boundaries intended to dictate where a soul could roam. Yet even as a child, Jackson possessed a restless, towering spirit. He excelled in academics and athletics, earning a football scholarship to the University of Illinois. However, the northern campus offered its own brand of quiet prejudice, prompting him to return to the South to attend North Carolina A&T, an HBCU where his activist heart found its rhythm. It was here that the young student-athlete realized that the most important field of play was not the gridiron, but the courtroom and the streets. A protege in the fire of revolution. By the mid-1960s, Jackson's theological studies at the Chicago Theological Seminary were interrupted by the visceral call of the civil rights movement. He traveled to Selma, Alabama to join Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and the chemistry between the seasoned leader and the ambitious young firebrand was immediate. Jackson became a trusted protege, eventually being appointed to lead Operation Breadbasket in Chicago. This initiative was his first major foray into economic justice, using the power of the boycott to force white-owned businesses to hire black workers. His life changed forever on April 4, 1968. Standing on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Jackson witnessed the assassination of his mentor. The blood of the dreamer was on his clothes, and the weight of the dream was now on his shoulders. While the nation mourned, Jackson internalized a hard truth. Dr. King had secured the right to vote, but it was now Jackson's mission to secure the power of the vote. Building the rainbow, push, and economic equity. In 1971, Jackson founded Operation Push, People United to Save Humanity, which later evolved into the Rainbow Push Coalition. This organization became his primary vehicle for social engineering. Jackson understood that civil rights were hollow without economic parity. He pioneered the concept of corporate accountability, aggressively negotiating with Fortune 500 companies to ensure they invested in the very communities that fueled their profits. He was a master of the moral leverage strategy, convincing corporate America that inclusion was not just a moral duty, but a business necessity. Through covenants with major brands, he opened doors for thousands of minority franchises, managers, and vendors, creating a new black middle class that owed its momentum to his relentless advocacy. The political earthquake, 1984 and 1988. The true transformation of American politics occurred when Jesse Jackson decided to do the unthinkable, run for President of the United States. In 1984, and again in a massive 1988 campaign, Jackson shattered the status quo. The political establishment dismissed him as a symbolic candidate, but Jackson was playing a different game. He built the Rainbow Coalition, a historic patchwork alliance of Black Americans, Latinos, white working-class laborers, disenfranchised farmers, and the LGBTQ+ community. He spoke to those who felt invisible. His 1988 speech at the Democratic National Convention remains one of the most powerful orations in American history. As he thundered the refrain, "Keep hope alive," he wasn't just giving a speech, he was providing a blueprint for the modern Democratic Party. He proved that a progressive, multiracial coalition could win millions of votes, effectively paving the road that Barack Obama would eventually walk to the White House 20 years later. The shadow diplomat and global peacemaker. Jackson's influence extended far beyond the borders of the United States. In a world of rigid official channels, he acted as the shadow diplomat, often succeeding where the State Department failed. In 1984, he traveled to Syria and secured the release of captured Navy Lieutenant Robert Goodman. In 1990, he sat across from Saddam Hussein in Iraq to negotiate the release of hundreds of human shields held before the Gulf War. From the jungles of Colombia to the apartheid-era prisons of South Africa, where he worked closely with Nelson Mandela, Jackson was a global messenger of reconciliation. He believed that no one was beyond the reach of dialogue, and that every voice, no matter how silenced, deserved to be heard on the global stage. The Twilight Years, a legacy of persistence. As the decades rolled on, Jackson remained a permanent fixture on the front lines. Even as he battled Parkinson's disease in his later years, his presence was a constant at rallies for healthcare, labor rights, and voting protections. He lived to see the world catch up to his vision of a multicultural democracy. His final years were spent mentoring a new generation of activists, teaching them that leadership is not about the seat you hold, but the people you stand for. When he passed away in early 2026, he left behind a nation that was more inclusive, more aware of its flaws, and more hopeful of its potential than the one into which he was born. The passing of a prophet. Jesse Jackson Sr. was a man of immense complexity and unyielding courage. He was a preacher who understood the politics of the street, and a politician who understood the holiness of service. He taught America that the margin is where the most important work happens. His death marks the end of an era, but his legacy lives on in every voter registered, every minority business owner empowered, and every young person who looks at a barrier and decides to climb over it. He didn't just witness history, he gripped it by the collar and forced it to move towards justice. Reverend Jackson lived his life by a simple, radical creed. As long as there is life, there is hope. And as long as there is hope, anything is possible.